Welcome to This Explainer. I am absolutely thrilled to have you here for what I honestly consider to be one of the most critical topics we will ever cover. Today, we're pulling back the curtain to give you a high-level strategic briefing on the world's most vital, yet surprisingly fragile resource. We're looking at the global geopolitics of water. And let me be clear right out of the gate, we are analyzing this strictly through the lens of global security, not just environmentalism. So put on your international policy analyst hats, because the struggle to secure this asset is already well underway.
When we think about the resources that shape global power, what usually comes to mind? Oil, right? Maybe gold, natural gas, rare earth minerals. Those are your traditional economic drivers. I mean, wars have been fought over oil fields, and entire economies are built around them. But here is the absolutely critical difference. While oil runs economies, water runs life itself. In international policy, we look at this as a brutal zero-sum game. If our oil reserves run low, hey, we can engineer new energy grids for wind, solar, or nuclear power. But there is absolutely no substitute for water.
To really understand this shift in global security, here's our geopolitical threat matrix for today. First, the new strategic resource. Second, shrinking supplies, growing demands. Third, dams and border tensions. Fourth, agriculture's threat to stability. And finally, the security imperative.
Let's move right into Section 1, the new strategic resource. We need to establish exactly why water is the absolute foundation of all global operations.
Okay, let's dive into this. There's a fundamental truth in geopolitical strategy, and it goes like this. Without water, crops cannot grow, industries cannot operate, cities cannot function, and human life cannot survive. It sounds incredibly basic, doesn't it? But from a geopolitical standpoint, this is a profound vulnerability. Think about your own city for a second. Every single supply chain that keeps it running is tethered to a water source. Every pillar of a modern nation-state hinges entirely on access to this single resource.
That brings us to our second briefing section, shrinking supplies, growing demand. Let's do the math on the global water deficit.
We always call Earth the blue planet, but honestly, that is a dangerous illusion. 97% of the Earth's water is saltwater, and another 2% is permanently locked in glaciers and ice sheets. To put that into perspective, if you scooped all the world's water into a standard 1-gallon jug, the easily accessible fresh water we rely on to run human civilization would amount to just about 1 tablespoon. That tiny, terrifying sliver is a surprisingly limited supply that's now being asked to sustain billions of people.
And that tiny sliver, it is being squeezed hard by several massive threat multipliers. First, population growth. The world supports billions more people today than just a few decades ago, which causes skyrocketing demand. Second, climate change is delivering longer droughts and extreme weather, aggressively reducing what's available. And third, overuse. We are literally pumping groundwater from ancient underground aquifers way faster than nature can possibly replace it. Just look at the Ogallala Aquifer in the United States, or the rapidly depleting groundwater tables in northern India. These critical reserves took thousands of years to fill, and we're draining them in mere decades.
So what actually happens when those supplies start running out? We move to Section 3, dams and border tensions. This is where we map out how supply issues are actively turning into geographical flashpoints.
Think about this. Many of the world's most vital rivers flow right across political boundaries. Take the Nile in Africa, the Mekong in Asia, the Indus in South Asia, or the Tigris and Euphrates in the Middle East. The dynamic is almost always the exact same. An upstream country builds a dam or diverts water, which creates a massive downstream risk for the nations sitting below it. For example, the Grand Ethiopian Renaissance Dam on the Nile makes downstream Egypt incredibly nervous about its own agricultural survival. Or consider how dams built by China on the upper Mekong allow them to essentially turn off the tap for Southeast Asia during severe droughts.
So, the crucial point here is this. Local infrastructure decisions now have massive macro consequences. A dam built in one country isn't just an internal engineering project anymore, it's a geopolitical lever. This is quite literally the weaponization of water. If you control the flow, you control your neighbor's economy. It's a profound shift in regional power dynamics that directly affects the survival of millions of people right across the border.
Next, we shift to Section 4, agriculture's threat to stability. We really need to examine a massive vulnerability hidden right inside the global agricultural supply chain.
Did you know that one of the biggest drains on freshwater globally is agriculture?
To feed a booming population, farmers have to produce immense quantities of staples like wheat, rice, corn, fruits, and vegetables. As the population rises, food demand rises, and therefore, agricultural water demand absolutely explodes. To put this in perspective, it takes over 3,000 liters of water to produce just 1 single kilogram of rice. Now multiply that by billions of people. It's staggering.
This leads us to what policy analysts call the allocation challenge. Governments are facing a brutal trilemma. An impossible equation, really. Step 1, ensure food security for your people. Step 2, sustain economic growth. Step 3, maintain environmental sustainability. With a shrinking supply of water, countries are being forced into increasingly agonizing decisions about how to divide up this limited resource. When the well runs dry, which of these 3 pillars do you let collapse first?
And that brings us to our final analytical section, the security imperative. Let's zoom out and look at the grand strategic and national security picture.
When water supplies fail, the problems do not stay contained to a single farm or a single town. They trigger a geopolitical cascade. Severe water shortages lead directly to agricultural failure, which causes food shortages. That sparks economic instability, which invariably leads to mass migration, and finally, social unrest. And this isn't just theoretical. Policy experts frequently point to severe droughts in the Middle East, which collapsed rural agriculture and drove millions into cities, as a major catalyst for the social unrest of the 2010s. It is a terrifying domino effect that can literally topple entire governments.
Because of this cascade, access to water is no longer something nations just simply hope nature provides. It's increasingly viewed as a core strategic advantage, requiring massive national investment. Countries are taking aggressive action, pouring heavy capital into enormous infrastructure projects just to engineer their way out of a national security vulnerability. But there is a dark side to this. Wealthier nations can afford to buy their way out of the crisis with capital, while developing nations simply cannot. And that's only going to widen the global geopolitical power gap.
This brilliantly illustrates the push for tech-driven solutions. We're seeing desalination plants turning ocean water into freshwater, advanced water recycling systems, smart irrigation, and AI-powered resource management deployed in modern cities to cut waste. But here's a really fascinating caveat. Technologies like desalination require massive amounts of energy. So, ironically, solving the water crisis requires having an abundance of the very resource we started this explainer talking about, energy, like oil and natural gas. It's this crazy closed-loop challenge that leaves the water insecure even farther behind.
Which brings us to the core thesis of today's explainer. Water is no longer viewed solely as an environmental issue. Many governments now see it as a top-tier national security issue. The transition is complete. The next major global struggles might not be fought over oil fields or rare minerals. They'll be fought over rivers, reservoirs, and basic access to clean water.
I want to leave you with this final, vital question. The issue isn't whether water matters. We know it does. The real question is, will humanity manage this critical resource before these localized shortages erupt into full-blown global crises? We are looking at what could very well be the defining geopolitical challenge of the 21st century. It's going to require innovation, serious investment, and unprecedented international cooperation. Think about that the next time you turn on the tap. Thank you so much for joining me for this explainer. Stay curious and keep learning.